There are several ways we could approach the problem of how to deal with the color div. Looking at homework, morning and afternoon, I think a lot of folks just kind of put the label in there, favorite color, and used render list item to do that, and then added the actual div to it back up in either handle submit or build list. That's okay. We're going to try to build the entire list item inside render list item. So how can we do it? Any ideas? What would happen if we did it now? What would happen if I changed this just called let's get rid of color item, and let's say append child render list item favorite color, and then just treat the div as the value. What's going to happen? Predictions? Is the whole thing going to break? Is it going to just print something we didn't expect? What do you think? What if we pass in a string here and a div here? Let's find out. Refresh. Not the 73. Yeah, whatever this is. Okay. Favorite color, object HTML div element. Cool. So we were sticking it in text content, right? If you try to stick something in text content that isn't a string, well, as luck would have it, every object in JavaScript has a function on it called toString. So it'll just call that. It'll just turn whatever it is to a string. And in this case, toString says square bracket object HTML div element square bracket. Not really what we were looking for. Hey, it could have been worse. It didn't throw an error. Or maybe an error would have been better because we would have known something was wrong without having to look so carefully. Though we don't have to look that carefully. All right, so we can't do it that way. How else might we do it? Yeah.
Couple of the values you're giving it with some sort of identifier of the type and then decide what to do with them.
Okay, so we could check what type it is that's being passed in, see if it's a string or if it's a non-string, and then basically branch inside there. We could do it that way. There is a keyword type of in JavaScript. So like type of name. String. Type of document dot create element div object. So we can see if it's an object and then decide what else to do with it. Given a div, how do we actually put it inside the list item? Not using text content, but using what? So we have an element that we want to add to another element. What do we use? Append child, right? Just for fun. Pretty sure it won't work. But what if inside list, render list item? Well, so they're all going to get the label, right? So let's do this. Let's say item dot text content equals label, or label colon. And then let's just try doing append child with the value. Item dot append child. I don't know what will happen if we give it a string, but if we give it a div, it should work, right? What happens? Explode! It didn't do any of them. Well, it should have at least worked with the third one, right? As soon as it gets an error, an uncaught error like this, it's just going to stop executing JavaScript altogether. So if you see something like this, that doesn't mean it wouldn't have worked with the div. It just means it encountered an error and didn't know what to do from there. So if you had your DevTools closed when this happened, it would just look like absolutely none of your code worked, even though there's really only one tiny thing wrong. So don't forget when you're troubleshooting to keep your DevTools open, because there might be an error there that points you right at it. Looks like on line 14, failed to execute a pin child on node. Parameter 1 is not of type node. Okay. So a pin child on line 14, it takes a parameter, and it expected that thing to be a node, whatever a node is. Safe to assume that an HTML element is a node, and a string is not. So what if we just commented out age and name and just left color in there? Would it have worked then? Yes. So that is what we need to do with the color div, but it won't work with age and name. Let's do a little error handling. That's one way we could do this. What if we try to append child, and if that fails, then we'll just use text content? How's that sound? We'll just see if it triggers an error. If it does, we'll deal with it. So we'll just try to append the child. Try. That can't be a thing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it can. So we'll try it. And then if there's an error, we'll catch the error. So this is one way of doing error handling in JavaScript. You say the thing that might trigger an error. And then remember, if it does trigger an error and you don't catch it, because remember it said uncaught type error. If you catch it, then you can rescue the page and it'll keep going and doing whatever else, so the whole thing won't fail. So it'll hit your catch block here, and it'll pass in whatever the error was. Let's see. Let's throw a debugger in here and see what that error. We might not be able to do that there. Let's say console log E. Refresh. Type something in. Notice this isn't red anymore because this is just something we console logged. So it went on and it successfully did the div because the whole thing didn't crash because we caught our error. But it tells us what the error was. But hey, we can do whatever we want inside this catch block. We could, instead of appending child, add to the text content. So we want a plus equals now, right? We don't want to blow away this label up here. So we could concatenate onto the text content, whatever the value is. So when name and age come in here, it's going to try to append child. It's not going to work. It's going to hit our catch block. And then we're just going to stick it onto text content. Handy thing to know how to do. Does it work? It does. Now all three work, calling the same render list item. And back up and handle submit. We don't need to know that favorite color is really any different. We just passed in a div and assumed that our render list item thing can handle stuff like that. Cool. So now we can build list items with either a string or an element. And it works either way. Let's push that change. Questions? All right.